All right, there we go. You may notice that we're not going to be using this clicker this morning. We won't have slides, and the theory behind that is if you don't have something to read and just look at the whole time, then you actually have to listen to what I'm saying. So immediately following this, there will be a test in the foyer. You can pick it up on your way out and fill it out. I'm just kidding, I'm kidding. No, but it's such a blessing to be here this morning and have the opportunity to speak on what would be called by Colton and Giles, Jim Hall Sunday. And they call it that because it seemed like every time Jim Hall was invited to speak here, he's like, oh, absolutely, I want to be with the early church family. I have so many great people there that I know. But it always happened to be the week that LCCC Nakota session was about to take place. And so Jim Hall would get here to speak, and all of his friends that he came to connect with had left him to go to camp. And with Jim Hall having gone to be with the Lord, I now get to take that spot, at least for this year. And it's good to come home and not see Colton Mays, I guess, and to not see Giles, because they've all already gone to camp. But it's good to be here this morning anyway, just to spend this time with you and have an opportunity to share a message with you from the Word of our Lord. This morning, I want us to see through the text a challenge that Christ gives through a parable to our everyday lives. A challenge of where we place priorities. And now, in my own preparation for camp this week, I speak there again tonight. I'm helping Austin, the director, teach a couple Bible classes during the week. I've got devotionals and small groups and these other things that I'm engaged in. So when you sit down the week prior and you say, okay, I've got 8 lessons to prepare this week. How do you list them out? How do you prioritize? And that can be said for all aspects of our life. How do I take all of these things that seem to draw my attention, and how do I prioritize what is going to drive my life forward? Amen. One of the ways that we can see this is through this paradigm, this idea that we've been driven by in our country specifically, really for many, many years. Have you heard of this idea ever called the American dream? It's this shadow figure that many people through the ages have chased, looking for this idea of success through hard work, this idea of aligning their priorities behind doing whatever they can and pouring themselves out towards this goal. And in return, the American dream says that you'll achieve it. So this morning I want to look through that lens and see that Jesus is going to challenge our attitudes and our motives when it comes to the idea of prioritizing according to the American dream. Some major figures that we kind of see this American dream personified in. We think of people who have successfully lived out this dream per se. And we think of figures like Elon Musk. He grew up in Pretoria, South Africa. He was the child of divorced parents. When he was 12, he taught himself computer programming and sold the computer code for a video game called Blastar for $500. His goal after graduating high school was to become an American, and in 2002, his dream would come true. He became an American citizen, and he made his fortune by building and selling companies like PayPal. Today, Musk is best known as the CEO of SpaceX and of Tesla Motors, and has an estimated net worth of $6.7 billion. We would look to this and say, man, he came from a rough background, but he worked hard, he put his nose on the grindstone, and look what he received in return. His priority of hard work and pursuing these things led to this fortune that he has. Or we may think of Oprah Winfrey, born into poverty in rural Mississippi to a teenage single mother raised in the inner city, but she never stopped believing in her dream to be like Barbara Walters. And by the age of 19, she was co-anchoring a local newscast. This would lead to hosting a daytime talk show in Chicago. She's known as an actress, an author, a magazine publisher, a theater producer, amongst many other things. She's not only become one of the most influential people, but she's also amassed great personal wealth in the process of nearly $3 billion, making her the only African-American billionaire in our country. the American dream lived out, again, by someone impoverished as a child, but by aligning priorities of hard work and never giving up on this dream, she achieved what people would consider the dream. And the last one that we maybe think of or know of is Jeff Bezos, born to a teenage mother and a Cuban immigrant father in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Bezos wrote up his business plan for Amazon in 1994 and started this business from a garage. In 2002, he founded Blue Origin, a human spaceflight startup company, and later purchased the Washington Post in October of 2013. He became a self-made millionaire with a net worth of $39.2 million. Many of these people that we can see the way that they align their priorities with a certain dream or a certain idea, a certain task, and by remaining true to that, they achieve this dream, which we can see in them always for some reason lined up with significant wealth for themselves. We've all heard the stories about people living the American dream. We watch movies about it, we read it in books. Some of us may be living the dream ourselves. And our society upholds them as people to look up to. These movie stars, singers, athletes, entrepreneurs, politicians. Our culture puts their drive and success as qualities to strive for. It essentially makes them heroes in our eyes. We hold up the American dream and the achievement of material success as a positive trait, a great thing in the culture around us. The Oxford English Dictionary defines the American dream as the ideal that every citizen of the United States should have an equal opportunity to achieve success and prosperity through hard work, determination, and taking initiative. But my question for us today is, have we ever stopped and contemplated the underlying attitudes, the underlying motives of the American dream? The problem of achieving success and prosperity through hard work, determination, and initiative, the American dream, is not just a United States issue. It's not a 2024 issue. You really find it in all areas of the world and throughout all of history. And really, as a matter of fact, it's what Jesus is addressing in Luke chapter 12. And that's going to be our text this morning. Luke chapter 12, beginning in verse 13. I'm going to go ahead and set the scene for where we arrive here. There's a crowd gathering around Jesus, and I kind of see this crowd as somewhat like one of the political rallies that may be going on in this election year. And Jesus is addressing some topics that have a tendency to rile up the crowd. They're trampling over each other, trying to listen to Jesus' message. And in all this excitement, someone in the crowd yells out to Jesus and says, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." We're not really sure why he's asking Jesus to judge between him and his brother. Now, we don't know much about this man, but he's not really that hard to figure out in view of the American dream. He is there listening to Jesus himself talk about the kingdom of heaven. But something else is really going through his mind the entire time. He's looking at this feud with his brother, and he's really thinking this entire time, I want my piece of the pie. Whatever it is that's being withheld from him, he's like, I want that. And my brother's not sharing it in the way that he should. Jesus stops teaching when he hears this statement in this moment. He turns to the person in the crowd and he says, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you?" Jesus, in this instant, identifies his motives, and he turns back to his disciples and he says, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." We realize pretty quickly what Jesus sees within the heart of this man, within his priorities, that this man is driven by greed. Some translations may use the word covetousness. Greed or covetousness is the excessive or the insatiable desire for wealth or possessions. Materialism would be a more modern term for greed. It's something that drives the need to be rich or popular or successful, to be happy, to be liked, or to feel worthy. Material possessions, physical comfort, and people's approval become more important, as they did for this man, than spiritual values reigning in their life. So let's understand quickly that Jesus isn't saying that possessions or wealth are sins, but rather that the insatiable desire for things is where the sin lies. The sin is in the discontentment. The sin is in the striving after those things. The problem is not the possession, it's the attitude by which we obtain that possession. Right now we're living on support and going through school, and frankly the way that lines up, we're pretty poor. But let it be known that it's not about the possessions, it's about the attitude. And so though we are poor, we are just as likely to be greedy as a wealthy person is likely to not be. Greed isn't something that chooses you based off your possessions. It's something that you choose based off your attitude in regards to possessions. Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, a statement that we likely know very well. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And our culture pushes people towards that love of money, and we, just like them, need to hear Jesus' message of be aware, not of the wealth, but of the insatiable desire for wealth as a means for our own happiness. And this is where Jesus continues on in verse 16, and he tells them a parable. He talks about this rich farmer who was blessed by the abundance of his crops. He was a very successful man year after year, this farmer. And he seems to be a success as a farmer because his barns, where he stores his grain, they're already full. And when he looks at the abundant crop that he has, once again this year, he begins to activate this plan that's motivated by materialism. His priorities all of a sudden are being filtered through greed, through materialism. His materialism becomes sin at this point when it influences his life goals. Because he makes this statement regarding the man in that parable. He sees that he has abundant crop. These barns are already full. So he says, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. When confronted by what to do with the blessing of such a crop, he's not focused on the blessing of the crop anymore. But he's focused on his need for bigger and better. His goal is no longer to just have a crop. It's to have bigger barns. You see how materialism has altered the way that he views even the blessings from God. His goal is to proceed with constructing bigger barns. He's no longer satisfied with what he had, but his priority was something bigger and something better. So the question remains, is it bad to have things? No. It is bad when our life's goals are influenced by things, by materialism. His materialism also not only influenced, but it drove his life choices. Again, he says about these barns, there I will store my surplus grain. When the abundance went beyond his ability to store up crops, he had to make a choice. And he could have done many things with it. He could have sold it. He could have shared it. He could have just given it away, but he didn't. His barns were full already. He had plenty, but instead of being content, he had too much stuff. He had to go rent that other storage facility. That one just wasn't big enough anymore. He had to go and get another one, build bigger barns. He wanted it all for himself, and so his priority shift kept it all for himself. And so again, we ask, is it bad to have things? No. But it is sinful when our life's choices are driven by materialism. And then another thing, his materialism offered him security. In the parable, the farmer says this, I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many, many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, be merry. The rich farmer thought that by having enough stuff, he was set for life. He could just spend time living life. The materialism of the rich man provided him security for his life and for his future. His priority shifted to, I have arrived. I'm good. I am set. And as he felt secure in his situation, he quickly had to come to realization of his own morality. As the Lord comes to him that night and says, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who's going to get all this that you prepared for yourself?" In the long run, he ends up with nothing because others get his stuff that he worked so hard to build these barns for. He's not even going to get to enjoy it. It's just going to go to the next man down the line. This rich farmer really just becomes a foolish farmer because his stuff that he was so focused on that drove the priorities of his life did nothing for him on the day that the Lord came knocking. And so again we ask, is it bad to have things? No. But it is bad when our security is based on those things. Jesus closes out this parable by saying it in Luke chapter 12 and verse 21, "This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God." I like the way that the NLT, the New Living Translation, says this. He says, "Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." So the question becomes, how do we be like Jesus? How do we be wise and not foolish like this farmer was? How do we store up a rich relationship with God? How do we get our priorities in line with Jesus first? How do we guard against all kinds of greed? And throughout this parable, we saw 3 or 4 things that drove him towards greed and showed how greed influenced his life and priorities. But we also see 4 priorities in the parable that guard against this greed. And so let's look at those 4. Priority number 1 would be to practice gratitude. I think the first thing that goes wrong in the life of the rich farmer is that he forgets where the crop came from to begin with. The parable started this way in verse 13. The ground, we say it again, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. It's not just an oversight of the writer there, that there's no reference to the labor of the rich man in relation to the yield of the harvest. But rather it is noting here by the ground yielding this harvest that the rich man did nothing to create that harvest himself. But his focus rather was on himself and what he had done, was storing it away in the barns. And he forgot to give thanks for the gift of the abundant harvest. He took God out of the equation and focused only on himself. We are so blessed as people, but let's not forget where it comes from. You know, around 88% of the people in the United States fall in the top 2 categories of the wealthiest people in the world. You know, by owning a vehicle, you automatically secure yourself a spot in the top 10% of the wealthiest people in the world, just by owning one. Imagine that for those of us who maybe own 2. If you don't own one yet, you can see Ralph Watts after the preacher said that. But really, these simple things that we consider necessities or the essentials of life, just by having those things, we're the rich among rich. We are so blessed, but the way that we guard against letting those things drive our lives is by acknowledging God's blessings in those things. That they didn't come about by our own doing, our own efforts, but they came about as a gift, as a blessing from God. James chapter 1 verse 17 says, "Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father." Then Paul tells the Thessalonians to give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus, is to give thanks. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 18 is where that comes from. The way we maintain the right priorities in our lives is seemingly simple. Be thankful. Be grateful for what we have. When we focus on me, we become greedy. But when we focus on Him, we become blessed. Any wealth that we have, or maybe we don't have, is a gift from God. And I like this statement that summarizes it well. It's not happy people who are thankful, but it's thankful people who are happy. So let's be thankful people. When our goals, our choices, and our security are driven by thankfulness to God, we store up a relationship with God. Priority number 2 is to invest in people. The rich farmer was faced with an extra or an abundance. He automatically, in this moment, though, wanted more. He wanted bigger stuff. Bigger and better stuff to handle this growing greed that was building up inside of him. Is this not the way that our society around us functions? When we have more than we need, we feel the need to just get more, to buy more stuff, to get bigger and better stuff, or even rent more space to hold all of our stuff. There's a caveat to this too. Sometimes we buy on credit. We go into debt so that we can believe that we have an abundance. When we don't, we will find any way, even if it's digging ourselves in a hole, to feel like we have the stuff that's going to make us happy. But the reality is we don't really have an abundance at all when our life is driven by those things. I think of just some simple examples from our lives. Our clothes. Maybe we need more clothes every single month, though our closets are already full of them. And they say the average person only wears 20% of what's in their closet. I can think I was packing for camp this week, and I was laying out my outfits, and I had my pairs of shorts for the week laid out. And as I was laying them out, I came to a dilemma and had to have my wife come and match them for me because I realized that I have a favorite t-shirt. And when I looked, I had 4 different pairs of shorts. And I said, oh, the shirt that I always wear with these shorts is that one. But it's also the one I wear with these, and the one with these, and the one with these. Now, I've got 37 other t-shirts. But that's the one I wanted to wear 4 days in a row. Now she won't let me, so. But is it not true of us? We just want to build a bigger closet. We toss it to make room. The average American throws away 81 pounds of clothing per year. 81 pounds. Maybe our phones. I need the iPhone 15 because the 14, come on. That's last generation. That's old school by now. Or my 52-inch TV. Man, that just won't do anymore. I need an 86-inch 4K LED TV, or I need a camping trailer or a boat to get away. I need a bigger, better car, a newer car, a bigger house. I need this, I need that, I need whatever it is. Our culture is all about pursuing stuff, and we need to align our priorities to control our attitude towards stuff. We conquer materialism in our lives by prioritizing investing in people instead of in things. Jesus did that with 12 young men, and look what it did to the world. Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 to 22. Peter and Andrew are fishing, and Jesus called to them. He said, "Come, follow me, and I will send you out to fish for men." They left their nets, they followed him. James and John were preparing their nets, and Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed Jesus. Peter, Andrew, James, and John left work to experience life as a disciple of Jesus. But what might investing in people look like for us? Invite and pay for someone else's lunch. And during that lunch, talk about spiritual things. Pray for one another. Buy someone a book that has shaped you spiritually and give it to them in hopes for the same. Give generously to the young people who are willing to invest in spiritual things like going to camp, going on mission trips or youth retreats or all of these other things. Take a single mother or father shopping and buy them the things that they need and are unable to buy because they just can't. Send a struggling couple to a marriage seminar and pay their way for it. There's many things that we can do. But the other thing about investing in people is that you don't just give to ministries, but you step up and you do it yourself. You don't wait for church ministries to handle it. You just do it. You take the risk. You invest your financial blessings in the lives of people. Young families, couples, elderly couples, Christian, non-Christian. It really doesn't matter who you're investing in. If you can do it with non-Christians with a focus on bringing them to Christ, whoever it is that you're investing in, it matters. Investing in people matters. Priority number 3 is to prioritize relationships over stuff. And it kind of connects with the last one. But the rich man was all about his stuff and where he was going to put it. All he wanted to have was stuff. More things. A post came across my feed when I was scrolling this week, and it's a guy reminiscing about his life. And I'll just read it out to you here. He said, I wasted a lot of time chasing the mastery of my career to make a better life for my family instead of living life with them. What's the purpose of gaining that big promotion if you have no one to celebrate it with? These basic factors most of us know, but I failed to apply them to my own life. And they are these 3. Number 1, time is more valuable than money. Number 2, work will always be there, but your family may not. Number 3, what is important is to be present and to be involved. Maybe examples for our lives is, instead of being the people who work 70 hours a week to buy their kids stuff, let's maybe give up a little bit of that financial gain and spend time with family. Maybe our priorities, our perspective needs to change a little bit to say making money is not as important as spending time. Maybe it's putting in sweat equity on ministry opportunities over just giving financially to those things. Getting involved ourselves and not just paying to make sure that it happens. Going to people's homes for dinner, spending time around your table instead of just going out to eat is another way to put the experience, the investment, over consumerism of fast food. Luke chapter 19, verses 1 to 10, we get the story of Zacchaeus, who we know as the wee little man. But Jesus goes to Zacchaeus' house because Zacchaeus needed the experience of being with Jesus, being with another person to get his priorities straight. So be like Jesus and prioritize relationships so that you're building better futures for yourself and for others. Because what's Zacchaeus when Jesus shows up? He's a wee little man, a tax collector, hiding up in a tree. But through intentional relationship, investment from Jesus into his life, by the end of it, Zacchaeus walks away saying, if I have cheated anyone, I'm going to give it back 4 times over. A total perspective shift. Tax collectors were known for not just collecting the tax that was needed to pay to Rome, but they made their living by taking a little bit extra and putting it in their pocket. And now he's saying, for the years on end that I've done that, I'm going to pay it back 4 times over. All of a sudden, by the investment that Jesus made in him, money wasn't a matter issue anymore. But what was blessing the lives of other people. Priority number 4 is to live today for Christ. There's a song by Alabama that's called Start Living. And in the song, it tells the story of a man who he wants to live a good life. And when he's in school, he looks forward to graduation, thinking at that point, he can start living. Time passes on, and he's working a dead-end job. And still, though he's graduated, he still has this desire to start living. He has to work, but someday he will get to do it all. He believes that maybe it's at retirement. At retirement, he will get to start living. But that time comes, and now he's at the doctor's office, and he receives that bad news that there's nothing they can do for him anymore. And he knows at that point, he's never going to start living. The point of the song is, don't look forward to when you can start living, but prioritize living today. And for us, living today for Christ, with our priorities, with our mind, our attitude set on Him. James chapter 4, verses 13 to 17 says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town, spend a year there, trade and make a profit. Yet you don't know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Basically, life is short. Live it today for God. That section would go on to say what you should rather do instead of making these plans is to say, if the Lord wills, is to prioritize, is to plan based on God, not based on what you want to do. And he follows it up with a statement that should really strike in our minds. He says, in this context, to him who knows what to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. And now we've all been told that planning, prioritizing, investing our lives each day, living for God and not living for our own desires is what we are supposed to do. We know what to do. And to him who knows what to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. So live each day for God. And a short PS, public service announcement during this is don't hear me say that you shouldn't plan for the future, plan for retirement, but just don't let your planning for retirement make you miss out on living for today. It's wise to build up for retirement. It's good stewardship. But don't let your security for the future depend on how much is in that retirement account. Live each day for God. When God calls you home, it won't matter if you're set for life or if you were living day to day. It only matters that you have stored up an account for an afterlife. An investment account for living each day for Christ that fills your barn with God and not stuff. So looking at the parable, what's the point? Well, here's the point. Jesus' parable teaches greed doesn't make you have a rich relationship with God. It's such a big problem for humans that Paul encourages Timothy to command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant nor put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. And let me tell you, it's not this life. The message is for everyone in all time to counteract the invisible forces of greed and materialism and to fill our barn with a relationship with God and not self, not stuff. The parable is a call to all who will hear it to get our priorities straight, to invest in a relationship with God, to be people who practice gratitude, to be people who invest in other people, to be people who prioritize experiences, and be people who live today for God. In other words, be like Jesus and make a difference in people while they live here on earth, but make a bigger difference in where they will spend life after this earth. If you struggle in this way, if your priorities have fallen out of line or been driven that way by the need for something else, we're here to help you realign those, to find ways to focus on God in your life and to live today for Him. If you need a priority check, and there's days that we all do, but today is the day that you need one. Find those who have them straight right now. Let them help you. Talk to them. Invest in one another today. As we all go forth from here into a world that's driven by greed, let's go forth from here driven by God to love His people, to love Him, to invest in those things and see the blessing that comes out of that for us. If you need help with any of these things, if you need to begin building your barn of a relationship with God through baptism this morning, we are here to help you. We want to help you. And so let us do that now as we stand and as we sing our song of invitation.